let's pause. Before I get into what happened, let me introduce myself. I'm Cupcake of Cupcake and Key Lime Play, a channel I share with my fiance, Key Lime, and together we make videos. And for our first video, I thought it would be fun to try my first ever Sims 4 Legacy Challenge, which just so happens to be cursed. But of course, you can't have a legacy without a sim. And for the progenitor of this legacy, I made Franklin Doherty. Going from left to right, we can see Franklin's outfits: his everyday clothes, his formal clothes, his workout clothes, his sleep clothes, what he wears to parties, what he swims in when it's hot outside, and when it's cold outside. After making Franklin, the next important step was to build a house. To give you a quick sneak peek, here's the first floor, where there's a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. The second floor, which has an office, another bathroom, and a children's room, as well as the entire shell of the house, with a nice patio on the side. While the build is going on in the background, I'll kind of walk you through what I was thinking as I built this house for Franklin. You can kind of see in the top left, I had intended to make this a tiny home. I was aiming for the perfect 64 tiles because I knew that way I'd be able to give him a few more lot benefits, such as building skills faster. But as you'll see later, that kind of didn't really work out. And that was because I wanted to build a home that not only had space for Franklin, but whatever partner he had in the future. The office I wanted to give him so that he could write his books and work on his skills, as well as a children's bedroom. And since this is a legacy challenge, I wanted to make sure there was room for at least one of the new generations. As you can see, I was kind of toying with the idea of putting the house on a foundation, but in the end, I thought it would be better not to and keep it ground level so as to save a few simoleons where I can. But I did end up adding a second floor, which for a starter house is a little bit of challenging because it takes a lot of extra money to furnish that extra space. As you'll see, I was really struggling with the layout of the lower part of the house, so I decided to move up to the top floor and really focus on that part since I knew that was where the office would be, as well as the children's room and the second bathroom. But I was really struggling with this downstairs because I knew that I wanted the bedroom to be in that bigger part of it, but there wasn't really any space that made sense for a bathroom up there. So instead, I focused on coming upstairs, where you can see I sectioned off a 1 by 3 bathroom, a tiny office with a diagonal wall where the door would be, and a children's room in the back, or what would become a children's room. And you can see now, I'm really playing around with the ideas of where I can put a bathroom, but nothing really seemed to be working. But I think as I worked with it a little more, you see that it finally kind of clicked what I should do. And I ended up making the bathroom like perfectly fit between the bedroom and what would become the kitchen. And so the shape of the house moved from a lowercase t to an uppercase T. Now, you can kind of see I was working with the roofs a bit, but I have to be honest, I suck at roofs. So the first try or two was a little awkward, and I really didn't want the roof to cut off the second floor the way it was. So I ended up going in with some extra roof pieces to try and narrow it down a little more so that wall had all of its own space. And you can kind of see I added this overshoot over the front door, or what would be the front door. And I thought that would be a really cute space to either add a balcony or a garden, or so, at least some greenery in front of the windows, which, as you saw in the sneak peek, it ended up being some greenery. But I did kind of toy with the roof here, and I really didn't like it. I don't think it fit very well. It kind of stuck out in places that didn't look very cute, but I ended up going with a trim, as you can see, and then painting the roof a dark black with that corrugated metal, which I really like. It's probably one of my favorite roofs. And then I added the doors, and initially I had this bluish swatch to them, but you'll see later that gets changed to them being all white: windows, doors, everything. I then went in with some lights so that way I could see when I started furnishing the house. But as you kind of notice here, I was playing around with a lot of different swatches of wall paint, none of which really were sitting right with me. I did, however, really like the brick. I just wanted to make it darker, which is the first thing I did. I then found the plaster, and I thought that fit a lot better. Not only did it match the doors better, but I think it just made the house look a little cleaner. You can see here I sectioned off a part of the outside that would be a sort of little patio where I'd had more skill building stuff later. And I tried to put a roof on it, but it really didn't look good. And I couldn't figure out a way to make it look good. So I ended up just scrapping that completely. I then made the fence a little shorter because there's something about the taller one that's just a little too tall. But then I ended up going in with some windows. And I noticed when I was doing that that this back part of the wall looked a little awkward. In order to fix how those were clashing, I went in with some columns and added those to each of the corners, especially on the brick parts. And not only do I think that gave it a bit of dimension, it really helps that back part later when I go in and put in the windows. I did kind of play around with putting the posts on the front, but I don't think it really worked out well, and none of the spandrels were any of my favorites. I then moved inside where I was testing a lot of different swatches of wallpaper, and I was really struggling here because none of them worked very well with the doors, but I knew I wanted the doors because they had a nice matching window set. But I did end up going in and changing the swatches of the doors, which I think really helped. And instead of making them that weird steel blue gray, I made them all white, which there's a lot of white in this house, as you'll see later. So it's not my favorite, but I think in the end it looks a lot better than any other option. And as you can see, I was kind of trying to get a whole view of the house to see, make sure it looked okay. And once I realized I liked it, I moved inside again and I just put a neutral white wallpaper on the entire house. And I go back in a little later with some other swatches, especially in the office and things like that. But for now, I put that white one in the main areas. And then in the office, I actually use the maximalism kit, which I really like, at least the wallpaper. It looks really cute in the office, whether you're using the tiger or the flowers. It adds a bit of needed color and dimension to the house that I think is a bit lacking. But then for the children's room, I was kind of stuck a little bit, but I ended up using this gingham swatch just because I thought that was really cute. And it also left it open to interpretation. There's still a lot of room to grow, change, fill it out. But then I moved to trying to figure out what kind of flooring I wanted to use. I did end up using the white wood, and looking at it now, it's not my favorite. I almost wish I went in with one of the more tan or beige swatches, and I think that's something I'll probably change in the future. But I've then moved to the patio where I found this gravel that I really liked, and I ended up putting that there, and I forgot to put it on the front, but I will put that back in later. Seeing that the walls were done, I now needed to move on to the furniture. And I really wanted to make sure that I could at least meet all of Franklin's basic needs. And that was really just like the bathroom, the bedroom, and the kitchen. So that's what I focused on here. You'll see over the next few minutes that that's all I did because that's all I really ended up having money for. And while I did spend a little extra on clutter and things like that that weren't totally necessary, I thought there were cute details that, while the house was going to be empty until he started making more money, would just fill it up enough to at least keep us satisfied. You'll notice that this entire bathroom from top to bottom is decorated with the sleek bathroom kit. And while I don't mean to sell that kit to anyone or anything, if you are going to buy a kit, this and the Cozy Kitsch kit are probably two of my highest recommendations. I did try and make that orb light work, but I didn't really like it. So I ended up sticking with the saucer light just because it provided a much more ample amount of light. You'll see that once I finished the bathroom, I tried to do this thing with the double window, but I didn't really like the way it looked with them up in the corner like that. So I ended up only doing the single small window in the bathroom. I then shifted over to where I knew the kitchen was going to be, and I used the Home Chef Hustle wallpaper to kind of map out where I thought it would lay out. I did get distracted by the stairs. Thankfully, all I ended up doing was switch the swatch from black to white and added a railing before finally going back to the kitchen and finalizing the wallpaper in there. I then finally moved to the bedroom, put in some of the Dream Home Decorator pack, and while I initially toyed around with the idea of trying to put some big mirror in the corner, none of the swatches really matched, and I ended up just using the Dream Home Decorator mirror on the wall, which might not have been ideal, but I think definitely looked better altogether. And then you'll kind of see in a second that I use the Dream Home Decorator nightstands with the same swatch that I use on the dresser. And I tried to place a few items on top of them, like some books, a flower pot, and a little clock. but I tried to keep it simple since I was trying to save as much money as I could. Seeing that I still needed to decorate the kitchen and with the counters being some of the more expensive items, I was really trying not to use it too much of my money here, but I did want to add some nice decorations, at least for the time being. Just as I did with the bathroom, once I was finished decorating the bedroom, I went back in with some of the windows and I tried to figure out a few good places to put them. You can kind of see I tried to use that bigger one, but didn't really like the way it looked and ended up using these small ones just all around the house for consistency's sake. You can see I thought about putting two windows in that corner because I wanted to put a dining table, but I ended up just sticking with the island counters as well as some bar stools because I thought that would be cheaper in the end. But then I moved to the upstairs where I finished putting some windows before moving back downstairs to finish the kitchen furnishing. As you'll see in a moment, I ended up using these base game counters with a really pretty yellow swatch. And it was cool because I didn't recognize them from any time I had played before. And I found out that they were actually added in a base game update, which I thought was super cool. They're super cute. And they even ended up inspiring me to change the back wall splash to a more yellowy swatch to match them. I did try to use the Home Chef Hustle fridge, but seeing as it was a little expensive and I still wanted to get an office upstairs as well as the stove so I could cook some food, I did end up having to sacrifice that and put in one of the more simple fridges. I tried to use the country kitchen fridge, but that unfortunately was a little too expensive as well. I then added these really cute life and death bar stools, as you'll see in a second, with some gold metal for the feet and a nice simple white chair. And then while I really wanted to add a third counter and stool, I thought it would be best for my money to not do that for now, and instead just decided to stick to two. It was also around now that I realized I wouldn't have enough money to get a living room, and so I sold that country kitchen fridge and focused on trying to make the office happen. And while I was disappointed to leave the rest of the house empty, I was excited to move into the office where I put a desk and a chair from the comfy gamer pack and a small portable laptop with the last $1,000 that I had so that my sim could work on his skills a little bit. And then I tried to make this little roof garden work, but seeing as I only had 71 simoleons left, I didn't even have enough money to put in the half wall that I wanted. In fact, I didn't even really have enough money for the plants either, so I ended up just leaving it for the time being. And while that's pretty much it for the speed build, you'll see the house change a lot in the background to the video as it goes on and as I play with the sim. On that note, it's time to play with the sim. But first, I think there's something we need to address, that being the curse. The craziest part about all of this isn't the fact that my only sim died 2 days into starting this legacy challenge. It's that after 800 hours in this game, I've never had a sim die that wasn't of old age or something a little more peaceful. So having Franklin die 2 days into this challenge, I was surprised. And it's safe to say that everyone in the Twitch chat at the time watching this happen was also laughing. It was also at this time that you can see me scrambling to hit the pause button, to try and save, to try and go back, and realizing that I hadn't saved since the beginning. I was fortunate enough, though, that someone in the chat earlier had asked me to save and upload the house to the gallery, which is what I ended up doing when they asked. So I did have something to fall back onto. But after this happened, and after the Grim Reaper came for Franklin, I did have to load back in all the way to an empty lot and rebuild the house. It was overall a pretty crazy stream, but weirdly, it wasn't even the craziest thing that happened. For now, though, let's move on to rebuilding the legacy. If earlier was a speed build, this is a speed run of everything that happened in the first year of the legacy challenge. The first thing we did was make Franklin find a job, and afterwards we quickly put him to work building his skills. But that was much easier said than done. After the incident with the fire, we didn't really trust Franklin to work with anything that either could A, electrocute him, or B, set him on fire again. So, for the time being, I made him forage around for some crystals and frogs and made him fish a little bit. This gave us enough money to invest into a fire alarm. This was recommended to us by a viewer from earlier, and thankfully ended up saving our life. I did accept the free money from the ghost who called, but then I tried to focus on really building my skills as well as working on some of the aspirations. Seeing as I did have some of those things built up in the previous playthrough before he died, I really tried to sit down and work on those again. It was a little boring, but it was funny to end up writing a sad book based on Franklin's life. And as you can see, I kind of messed around with the description of the book a little bit, which I don't do too often, but in this case was super funny. And it was just a really fun time sitting down with viewers and kind of making fun of the situation. When all was said and done, we all agreed that Franklin probably deserved a break. Not only was this his second life, it was also his chance to find a way to continue the legacy. And being at the bar, there was a good chance we'd meet that one person. But since we didn't that night, we came back home, published a few books, worked on our painting skill before deciding to go back out again. But this is where things got a little more interesting. You'll notice in a second that we were really considering the prospect of meeting Don Lothario. I was warned by chat that this probably wasn't a good idea, as there was some deep lore behind why he's a player and shouldn't be trusted, so I didn't end up going for him. Instead, we found Travis. Travis seemed like a very good potential. He seemed super sweet, friendly, and we hit things off at the bar. And while everything was looking good, we still didn't want to rush too much. After all, it was only the end of our first week, and we still wanted to play the field a little bit. But we did really like the prospect of Travis. And so we tried to flirt with him a little bit, and it ended up going a little awkwardly, as you can see. And not long after, Travis went home. It was 2 in the morning, though, so I can't blame him. Despite that blunder, though, we were surprised the next morning when Travis called us right before we were about to go to work to ask us on a date. Unfortunately, I did say no since Franklin did have work, but it did give us a lot of hope for what was coming next. You might be wondering, Cupcake, what are the plans for the future? And to that, all I can say is sit back and watch the greatest love story of this legacy so far. It all started with our first date of 3. Things were looking good. We had the friendship bar about halfway, and it was time to start building the romance bar a little bit. Seeing as we didn't want to rush things too much, I really focused on the date objectives, which actually ended up helping a lot in the end game. And as you can see a moment ago, it did help them get their first kiss. And while I wasn't too sure I wanted to rush this along, it was a very good way to track the progress of the relationship and see how things were going. That way, I didn't have to only look at the bars of their relationship, but also see how the objectives were going between them and celebrate some of the smaller goals. This brings us to the second date, which again was more goal oriented, where I focused a lot on the objectives of the date and ended up meeting them pretty fast. And once I did complete those, we actually ended up making things official between Travis and Franklin. And as you can see, celebrating in a pretty unconventional way. I guess you could call it a little trashy. Moving on, we got a call from Travis where he warned us about our death, but we didn't really take this too seriously, even though we should have. Even though we probably should have learned from our past mistakes. Because almost immediately after we got that call, in fact, right after this second fire started, and honestly, I could not believe that 2 happened like this. Fortunately, though, that fire alarm that we had invested in earlier came back to help us. And after surviving that second traumatizing event, we moved on to our third and final date. And despite the scares, I think this was our best date yet, and you'll see why in just a little bit. After having a few drinks, working on our relationship a bit, you can see our bars are entirely full. It's at this point that I was feeling pretty confident and felt that I could ask the question. Travis said yes, and we were happily ever after. Weirdly enough, though, even though we threw the wedding event, I was struggling a little bit. And as you can see, he ended up actually going to the bathroom at the end of the aisle, which weirdly enough stopped them from getting engaged or getting married. So I had to do that again, and I just made them elope at home instead because I did not want to sit through that again. But once Travis was a part of the house, I did work on his skills, help him do a few things, and even did some landscaping around the house. This also meant it was time to start preparing for a different kind of future, the future of this legacy challenge. Seeing as things were getting a little more stable, we decided to invest in a few things for a child's bedroom. We just got the desk, Blarfy, a few toys, nothing too big, but it was a good start and it got us excited for what was coming next. Until then, though, we had one more incident, and seeing that he was cooking, I thought it would be nice to save just in case. And you'll never believe it, a third fire happened. Thankfully, this time, not only did we hit the fire alarm, but we also had Travis, who we now have to not only thank him for putting up with us, we also have to thank him for literally saving our lives there. Unfortunately, since I had just invested in the more expensive stove, I was not able to replace it. But that didn't really matter because the next day I actually got promoted to career track 10 in the writing career and gave us a hefty bonus. And I also got the offer to put my books to the silver screen, which I was debating because I thought it would be cool, but I'm not a big fan of the fame. So I said no for now and instead had Travis and Franklin invest in a science baby. When the baby boy arrived, the chat recommended we call him Lucifer because of how cursed this was going, but we settled on Dorian because it seemed to suggest something just as dark and mysterious. And for now, all I'll say is the end. But thank you so much for watching. I know this isn't the cleanest video, but I had a lot of fun making it. And if you liked this video or if you thought it was funny, then like and subscribe. I'll probably be posting more of the legacy as I play it. Or if you'd like to watch it live, I do stream it on Twitch on Saturdays and Sundays. So I'll link our channel down below if you want to come watch, but I'd love to see you there.